I struggle with time away, not because the business needs me, but because I need the business sometimes.
There will be people who have 1,000 times more than they could ever spend in the rest of their lifetime, and they still will feel like they've got to get up and they got to go in and they got to make it happen because they don't know what tomorrow holds.
The drive to have more is to fill in a blank space within you. That's going to be empty.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Welcome to another episode of The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkle. And today I have a very special treat in store for you. I'm joined by client and very good friend, Mark Watson. I think Mark is just one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Mark is a serial entrepreneur. He's been a guest before on The Business Coach on earlier episode. I'm sure you would have seen that by now. If not, please go back and watch or listen. I think you'll really enjoy. But in this particular episode, Mark, who has started off back in all the way in 2007, leaving the world of real estate investment trusts, where he was one of the key players in a particular REIT. He had grown from the low man on the totem pole all the way through to one of the others doing acquisitions. He was responsible for directly leading the charge on over $150 million of real estate acquisitions, part of teams that did over $1 billion that way. In 2007, he took the leap to become a business owner in his own right. He started and has since this point done serial operating businesses, everything from commercial real estate, self-storage, office, apartment complexes, to real estate development projects, where he's done that for himself and for other real estate companies, where he's run the projects or his team has run the projects. He's also built a mini chain of gyms in 4 states with 18, 19 different locations, real estate brokerage company, real estate property management companies, brokerage company for mortgage. He's done lots of different things. In this conversation, Mark and I are going to dive into what's it actually like to own a level 3 company, an owner-independent business. If level 1 is the startup, level 2 is the owner-reliant stages where the business works, but because you, the owner, are there. What's it like to build a true owner-independent business and to own that? We get into what's his day look like today versus where it was once upon a time. What were the things along the way that held him back from owning a level 3 business? And I'll share things from my own life that have been impediments for me owning level 3 businesses. And that way you can learn not just from the good of what we've done, but most importantly, you can avoid the mistakes along the way that we've made. In the tail end of the conversation, we get into something I think is even more important than the useful periods of information at the start, which is, how do you, as a business owner, as someone who's built success, how do you know when enough is enough? What are the drives and motivations that push or call you to continue on? And how do you build and design the life that's most valuable for you to be the person that you were destined to be? I think you're going to love this episode. With no further ado, please join me and my friend Mark Watson talking about what's it like to own a level 3 business. Mark, welcome back to The Business Coach. Thank you for joining us a second time here on the podcast.
Hey, David, it's great to be here. I'm super excited about it.
Oh, all right. So here's what I want to start off here with this part. First of all, I'm just dying. I'm really curious here. I know for you, this year has been a bit of an experiment to take a significant amount more time off. And I want to ask you about the free Fridays that you're doing here, taking every Friday off. So have you been enjoying that? And first of all, have you been consistent with that Fridays off? And have you been enjoying that time away from the business every Friday?
I really have. I used to always try to take like Friday afternoons off, but then you go to the office and stuff just starts creeping in. But to be able to wake up on a Friday and just spend time with your wife and kids, my kids do virtual school, homeschool, so we're all there. It's like, I don't even know. It's been so good. I don't know how we did life before without having 3 days on a weekend. It's been phenomenal.
I love it. I love it. You're so much better at that than I am. I've shared with you, for those of our audience that don't know, Mark and I, besides having business we've done together, we're friends, right? And so that's a really special thing. But I've shared with Mark in the past, I struggle with time away, not because the business needs me, but because I need the business sometimes. You know, my kids are 2, the older ones are right in that teen period, and my youngest is right entering that. So they love spending time in small doses with dad. and small doses to vary for the different kids. And my wife likes bigger doses of me. However, she's got a rich life with all of her friendships and the parts. And I just really enjoy the business enough that sometimes I have to force myself to go start a hobby. I started watercolor painting, or poorly in other parts with that. For you on Fridays, when you're doing that, what are some of the things that you're intending to do this year on Fridays that you think will give you a lot of pleasure?
Yeah, so I think that there is an element of me that struggles with what to do when I'm off. And so I found that if I can have a project in mind, it's wonderful. If I'm in a total void, I will find my way going back to the computer and maybe doing like annual big planning stuff that I feel like oftentimes it's hard to find the time for. But one of the things I really enjoy is we have some family land nearby, about 350 acres, and we're doing different habitat programs on it. And so going out and working the land is something that's exciting to me. This semester, I'm working with a college group in investments class, and I'm putting together a case study to walk them through value add real estate and financial modeling. And so this Friday morning, I'm going to spend time putting together the financial model for that case study. And so just being able to use that time to do things that you enjoy is really important. And for me, it looks pretty different from Friday to Friday.
Love it. Well, this fits in right what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So one of the things we're going to start off talking about, what is it like to, from a practical standpoint, to own a level 3 or to own multiple level 3 businesses? And what we mean by that for our audience here is you've got 3 levels of a business, right? Level 1 is the startup. Level 2 is the owner reliant stage of a business. And level 3 is the business that's owner independent. Whether we want to keep owning it more passively, whether we want to continue to grow and scale it, whether we want to exit and sell it, varies with that. And we can break down these things into smaller, more granular ways with that part. But for the moment, there's misnomers. I think a lot of people fantasize that when you build a level 3 business, and I'm curious if this ever was something you had looked at in these terms. I see a lot of people see it as, oh, level 3 business would be like I own shares of Coca-Cola. I don't participate in any management. I literally just collect a check. Like I was talking with my sister and she's like, oh, maybe I should buy a business. Then I can have this mailbox money. I just buy the business and I get paid every month. And I'm like, well, having grown businesses for 30 years, I love you dearly, Stace. Generally, even if you buy the business, there will be a period where it's not quite that way, where owning the business more practically might mean that I might be spending 5, 10, maybe 15 or 20 hours in a month on a business from a higher order, managing the people who lead that business and holding expectations there. And someone like you that owns multiple level 3 businesses, it still means you can have some fairly busy business days with that part. Did you ever fall prey to this illusion that a level 3 business was completely like, you don't have to do anything? I'm curious.
Yes, I'm still looking for that one. That would be a really interesting one to have. I think so. I think that I've always wanted to do things more passively. And when you're working on a business, it's not like one day you just move into level 3 and you flip a switch and everything's different. There's different components of the business, and some of them kind of move into the level 3 pretty quick. Like you might have a sales organization and team that you don't have to spend time with. They're just killing it. And so that one's level 3, but you may have accounting practices that have gone backwards and it needs a little bit more of you. And so it's kind of just, there's different components and you're pushing all the pillars towards level 3. And I think it's very much an aspirational goal. Like, I don't know that we ever totally hit it. I do believe that people do totally hit it. But part of the problem with not totally hitting it is a lot of us as entrepreneurs are wired to do things a certain way. And there's always a piece of us that wants to be in the business or that we find satisfaction of being in the business. And so I do think that the benefit of level 3 is freedom of choice. I think that's the key component. You have freedom of choice of how you want to spend the most important thing, which is time. More important than the money the business makes and everything else. So getting to that freedom of choice is really, it's like being in utopia.
You sparked 2 things for me, Mark. First of all, I love the idea level 3 is more about the choice than the actual end product. But you said one thing, which was, I love this idea. I had this, as you were moving your hands there, I had this visualization I thought of the different, we call them pillars, as you and I know. Some people call them departments of a business, right? Sales, marketing, operations, finance. I had an image of each of these as a slider in each of these different areas where how owner independent, or how much depth, strategic depth does each of these ones have? And like you gave the example of a sales force that might be humming this quarter and it might need an hour of you a quarter just to just share and celebrate and to applaud the person leading that team. Where your accounting practices, they might have backslid and that needs more attention from you. That was a really interesting one. And then the second thing you said, which was level 3 is an aspirational goal. And I would agree with that. I look at it as sometimes it's an organizing principle. This is a theme. And I talk with clients all the time where I'll say things like, I love having concrete goals for the business. And I like having strategies, but there are some things that are more, I'll call them a theme, which is more of a loose intention that we keep coming back to, we keep looping back to as we build and grow the business. And this one theme, for example, that we've talked about here is this theme of making the business more and more independent of the owner, have more and more strategic depth. And I'm curious for you, as you've done this over the years, people always like to say, well, what worked best? But I'm going to flip it on its head. What were one of the biggest mistakes you made about owner independence? I'll start off and I'll share one of ones for me. Like, how did I blow it in an area? So probably the worst thing that I do in the past, looking back, that has hurt owner independence has been where I've handed off in theory, but I was such a controlling manager of the person I handed off to, such a control freak, that I retrained the person who was fantastic to basically just please me versus to do a great job and get the result that we had intended. That was a tough one to relearn that behavior, to outgrow that behavior, from where I was 15 plus years ago, got better at it probably 10 years ago, got really much better at it 5 years ago. And if you talk to my staff, they probably say, well, David, you're a work in progress like the rest of us. What for you was a place where you kind of look at, and that was a mistake for owner independence or for strategic depth that we can learn from the cautionary tale part that we all have?
I mean, for me, there's no question. It was when I started hiring more of a leadership operational role into our business. And I did a really phenomenal job at just totally abdicating all the responsibilities person. A huge lesson learned on if I could do it over again, and I have been doing it over again, I'm handing off certain pieces in a more of a focused way to a new person that's playing a key role in the business, as opposed to just, it's your baby now, good luck. That doesn't go so well. If I were to say a second one that's been a challenge for me is we all view the world through our own lens. And I tend to think that people are wired the way that I'm wired. And so particularly when it comes to performing or accountability, I just assume that people are going to want to achieve and do things the way that I would. And that the way that I need to hold them accountable is the way that I need somebody to hold me accountable. And that's not true. To hold me accountable looks very different than how you have to hold key people accountable in your business. And that's been a lesson I'm continuing to learn, is what does it look like to have healthy just accountability within the business, and making sure there's more clarity around it. More clarity. What is the value your role actually plays in the business? How do I know they've done well or not done well? How do they know they've done well or not done well? And that's something we're working on getting better at every day, because I think it's a really key part.
I love this idea of the structure of, like, if I know coming in how Geraldine is going to create value and how she and the company know she's doing great work, I can hold her accountable to that standard. But I was laughing at before, you and I were essentially two sides of the same coin of the mistake. I couldn't let go, and you let go too much with that part, right? So somewhere in there's a Goldilocks zone that says it's not abdication and it's not micromanagement. And the secret to that, to some degree, is recognizing that if I'm going to hand it off incrementally, like you suggested, which was really right on, there needs to be some framework of being able to hold the person accountable for the result. And that has to be thought through in advance so that everyone knows expectations in the playing field.
That's right. That's right.
When you look at the things that you've done really well, like a lesson that you've learned and you've been applying it really well in the last 2 years in your business as you continue to grow and scale them, but not from a place of brute force. Today, you work a lot less than you used to work, and the businesses still keep growing, which means it can't be about you doing more. It's got to be about the business doing more because you're being better about doing better. I'll share a lesson for me that was recent in the last couple of years. I came from a background where I really did not like, I don't love it even today, but conflict and confrontation, and that to me felt awkward and uncomfortable. in theory, I was comfortable with dealing with that. But the extreme cases, if someone did something integrity foul, I was very willing to step in and address that. But I really struggled with people who had a good attitude, but still were not acting or performing up to standard and addressing those things. And I just didn't want to deal with it. So what I would do is I would just not look at that area of the business, or I would use language that would minimize it. It's not really so bad, or the other parts. And what I put very hard was no longer do I finesse those conversations. It used to be that I would talk around the edges I have fairly good verbal skills, and I would finesse the conversation where we would both leave knowing we've talked about something, but the person, if they were to describe what the conversation was and what I had described the conversation was, it probably wasn't the same exact thing. Nowadays, I really push myself, even though I still don't find it my natural way, to say, I'm going to have this directly, a non-nuanced conversation. Let me be clear on what I'm asking for. This is what I'm asking for. This is what I'm seeing. This isn't working for me. This is what I'm wanting to see. And I've noticed that life is a lot better that way, because now I can go back and follow up, and I can celebrate progress, and I can redirect when I see the behaviors aren't. Where it used to be that I would dread the follow-up because I know that I never really fully directly told the person what I was really thinking. I had finessed it. What for you is something that you've learned and grown as a business leader, as an owner of businesses in the last couple of years?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, the topic you just hit on is probably, it's very much the way I feel in our businesses. I love to provide vision and energy and motivation, optimism, galvanizing a group to take the hill. I enjoy that immensely. And I often feel when I say drug back into the weeds, it usually has to do with having hard conversations around accountability for people that may be doing something in the business that's not what we're looking for, whether it's performance-based or even behavioral. And I often hear myself saying, I don't want to spend time doing that anymore. And sometimes you think, well, maybe I just don't want that business anymore, because that comes with the business. And I think that's that's one way to get rid of the situation that you don't want to be a part of. But the better way is, I think that you guys have called it adult conversations, to be able to sit down and have an adult conversation and just be candid and know that at the end of the day, the result doesn't matter. Like, oftentimes I used to not have those because I was fearful for what the outcome might be. And if that person got mad and left the business, then what would I do then? And so sometimes it was the fear side that kept me from addressing the situation. And I think now when you see it enough, it always works out. And it's not fair to you, and it's not fair to them not to have that conversation. And so that's something that I've learned to do better at, and also to pick the times of the day when you want to have those conversations. Just they typically go better when they're off the cuff and not planned and thought through 1,000 times over before you ever have the conversation.
When you said about they typically work out, I can think of the conversations I've dreaded and the 1,000 deaths I died when the reality was not nearly as bad. Even the bad realities, once they were done, they could be dealt with and cleaned up. Have you found that for yourself too, that even these things that you feared, even if they fall away, you didn't want them to fall? A person can't behave, you have to let them go, or something along the worst case scenario, so to speak. Yet I find that in all cases, certainly within 3 months, it's like it really didn't. It's better than it was before. Often within a week, it's better than it was before. I'm curious, has that been similar for your experiences?
Yeah, I feel like every time I do think that it always ends up better. It doesn't mean there's not a period of pain in between. And for me, the pain is less about the pain it's putting on me and more about the additional drag or drain I know it's putting on the other teammates.
Got it.
And that I don't like to see. And so then I'll try to come in and shoulder as much of that as possible. But typically getting to the other side, not typically, getting to the other side is always better. And so even if it comes to the worst fear, and sometimes it's good to think through what's the worst case scenario here. And then you realize it's not really that bad. So let's just keep moving.
Yeah, I love that. When you said something I want to come back to, because I had an insight from what you said that I've never occurred to me before. I realized something that I've done that's made my business life better, but I never had actually articulated. This is the first time. So your comment about you find that there's a part of you that doesn't love or find as much interest to hold these people accountable that you once upon a time were willing to do. And when I realized, recently this week, Mark, I was talking with another client, and he's built a very successful company and he's had great growth, but he's also at a point in time in his business where He's in his mid 60s. And part of him is, it's a level 3 business. And part of him's thinking, well, maybe I should step further out. And we were talking about a key hire he just made. And I was giving him a bit of coaching. And one of the things that came up with it, we were meeting with his executive team, was he said, I'm not going to manage this person that way, David. And you could almost see the defenses raise up, Mark. And I said, well, Ron, tell me this. If someone else could do that managing for you, would you be okay with someone else managing him the best practice way we've just discussed? And you could almost see like a relief, like, can I choose that? And it was interesting because it never occurred to him that he could have someone else in his business. And what I realized from what you said, combining with that, is I really love managing or leading highly functioning people,
Yes.
who have a great degree of self-drive, initiative, who are grow players, who want to learn, who take ownership, who, when they screw up, like all of us do, myself royally right there at the lead, when they don't say, gosh, this is why I'm defending myself. No, they just say, I made a mistake. Let's own it. What do we do to fix it or clean it up? And what I realized is, more and more in my business, I've pushed management of individuals one layer down so that I still directly manage essentially 4 people, but those 4 people are all this way. And when someone else new needs to be managed, they fit neatly under one of those 4 or unneatly under one of those 4. And I find that I really enjoy not having to be the first order managing of those key leaders who aren't grow players, high degree of self-responsibility, high degree of drive and initiative. And I'm curious for you, have you noticed that the people you enjoy managing more, and managing might be the wrong word because they don't need a lot of management, they really need leadership.
Yes,
Is it certain types of people you find that's more enjoyable for you to do? And then have you also noticed yourself pushing leadership of other people under those people so that you can keep yourself one step removed? I'm curious.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm currently looking for a really key operational role in our business. And as I work through their candidate profile, some of the pieces that are must-haves revolve around the type of person I really enjoy working with. Like, forget the technical skills the job needs, but I found that there are certain people that I just really enjoy working with. Characteristics about them: they're grow players, they're learners, they're coming and asking and working on solving problems that are to help the business grow, but not solving problems or creating problems that are within the business, if that makes sense. So I think some of our departmental problems, they're still problems. They need to be unlocked. But those are the ones I can't stand. I want to go face the problems that are out there, that we're going to move the business forward. And there's certain people that don't carry, I call it drama. They don't carry drama. They're just, what do we need to do to keep moving in a forward direction? And they take pride in their work. They own everything. And that, to me, is somebody who's exciting to work with. They bring you back in because you enjoy it. You enjoy being around them, as opposed to push you off because you think, those people you're not correcting. You're just having conversation with. Other people you're correcting or holding accountable, but it creates a confrontational situation. And then you walk away and think, I don't know if anything's even going to get better.
That's right. And I've expended all that energy. A friend of mine who runs a couple of very successful multi-million-dollar businesses says, David, we make sure that we put them through the Eeyore or Tigger test. I don't want to hire any more Eeyores in my business life. And I don't care about that one so much, but I do have a test, like you said. I hate working with drama magnets, people who, for whatever reason, their life just seems to suck in like a black hole. Drama. And I mean, that to me is one of the things that I try to sort and screen out with the people I end up having to spend a lot of time with.
An analogy that one of my I just lost the word, the person that you look up to and they help guide you.
A mentor.
A mentor.
There we go. Okay.
One of my very early business mentors said, you'll do best if you can recognize the difference between a racehorse and a mule. A racehorse is go, and all you have to do is guide them down the track, but they're going. A mule, you're constantly having to kick. So do you enjoy kicking or do you enjoy guiding? And I'm thinking, the racehorse is what I'm really interested in, because you just got to get them going down the track, and they're going. It's the mule, the constant kicking, and we got to keep that. It just is a disaster.
Yeah. As we think about owning a level 3 business, so these are some of the things we've talked through, but I'm curious, one of the things I've also noticed is the clients we have that have built level 3 businesses, the ones that seem to enjoy it most have also found a way that along the way they've built their investment world such that they reach a point where their outside investable net worth has created enough income streams and or just raw net worth that the pressure of the business working or not working is no longer really something that changes their life. Human beings can have unlimited needs and wants, right? We can. But the ones that have been happiest have found a place where the business works and they get great joy out of it, but it's no longer that they have the same economic reliance on that business working. And because of that, because they have these outside assets that are doing well for them and that are mapped out strategically, intelligently, that the business actually goes and does better because it's not the same degree of pressure. Now and I've enjoyed watching you do the same. It just happens that many of your core operating businesses revolved around helping to operate the real estate assets that you built up that happen to be great cash flow, PRI, passive residual income assets. But have you noticed the same thing, that as your financial life outside of your core operating businesses did better, there became a point that it reduced pressure on the operating businesses such that the operating businesses actually performed better, which was a little bit of an irony. Have you noticed that for you too?
Yeah, I think so. I think that you get to a place where I think we're just geared to stay head down, and we work and work and we work. And we don't always look at the investable net worth piece and what's happening in the background. And it takes at some point a realization that, oh, everything we've been working for is actually in place. Yeah, I think when you know and feel secure that your passive income streams can continue to stay in place without a whole lot of work, and chances are they're going to last you the rest of your lifetime. That you get to a place that I think some people would call that financially free. And when you get there and realize that, I think it does reduce a lot of the burden associated with just being in business every day or feeling like you just got to continue to achieve. Having said that, I think it depends on the person and the personality a lot. There will be people who have 1,000 times more than they could ever spend in the rest of their lifetime, and they still will feel like they've got to get up and they got to go in and they got to make it happen because they don't know what tomorrow holds. And then you can have somebody else who's not quite there, but they're already living in the freedom as if they are. So I think a lot of it is the psychological side of the individual person more than the actual reality of the financial world that they find themselves in. And
you say that here, that's a pretty important piece you just said there. What's driving this person, right? All of us have our internal drives. For some people, it's fear. I mean, I talked to one of our most successful business coaching clients. He's on his way to building $1 billion empire. What drives him, he says, David, when I grew up, I was hungry. And he didn't mean this metaphorically, Mark. He was like, literally, we didn't have enough food. I didn't know if my family was going to survive, immigrant family. And so for him, he's still got that piece of him that is a drive of, I need to eat. And that's not a financial reality for him. He's got enough to live, like you said, 1,000 lifetimes with that part. And then you have the other people who are driven by, I want to make a bigger contribution, or I just find that the work I do, like one of our clients runs a professional services firm. He's told me, he said, David, I'm never going to retire. I love what I do. And his comment is 55 hours of production work for my business is exactly where I want to be. For him, it's intellectually stimulating. He loves the work. He gets to deal with the most interesting of his clients. He would be lost without that part. That's his drive for it. Financially, yes, he's very well paid, but that's not what drives the behavior. So I want to ask you, you've done something I think it's really, really admirable. You and Kay, your wife, have made some thoughts and decisions about to ask the questions of what is the reason why you do stuff. I think you realize that you've created and built more than enough to handle your material needs realistically in this lifetime, but that you still, some people think that's going to kill your ambitions. It doesn't. It just lets you unleash the ambitions that were there. I'm curious for you, then I'll share for me what that looks like in my life. We're very similar, but we're also very different people, which is great because any of our audience are probably very similar in some aspects to you and I, very different than you and I. But how have you and Kay thought through this idea or this question of when is enough enough? And when you have enough, what next? Like, where do you go to continue to grow, or whatever the other values are for you? What keeps you getting up each day when you've reached the point where, in theory, you've saturated enough?
Yeah, that's just to paint a quick picture for who Kay and I are. For both of us, our highest value is our faith, our belief in God and Jesus Christ and what he did for us, right? So that's where all of our value system stems from. I've gotten up and worked every day in a traditional sense, and Kay gets up and works 3 times harder than me, but she's doing it on the home front. We do virtual schooling since COVID, and it's been phenomenal. It's homeschooling, but there's also teachers and a platform, and it's really great. But that's provided flexibility for us. And Kay and I have spent a lot of time, even in the last year or two, saying, are we living in keeping with our values? I think that there's a lot of places where we're living to survive, or we're living to impress man, I'll call it, or our fellow human beings, or we're trying to live up to some standard that we don't even know why it's the standard. And I think all of us fall into that to some degree. And so we're going back and spending time saying, what are our values? And do our behaviors actually align with them, or are our behaviors align with something that's not tethered to value? And that's been super fruitful for us. It's also created challenges for us to say, this doesn't really align. We have a choice to make. Do we sacrifice it or not? And as far as the comment on when is enough, I don't know. We can create metrics around it and passive residual incomes at 1.5 or 2 or 10 times our living expenses. And I don't know. I'm jealous sometimes of people who work long careers and they have a retirement day and they just reach retirement and they're just done. I think in the entrepreneurial world, we're always going to be doing something. I think we probably all have more than we need or ever going to need at the end of the day. And we're spending a lot of our time talking about where do we want to spend our time. And right now for us, we've got young kids, 12, 10, and 7. We've got a window that is closing on the amount of time that we can have an impact on their lives. And so we've looked at a lot of things we'd like to do in work, but also in missions and different church organizations. And we've said yes to some, but to a large degree, we've said, let's really focus on this small window of these children that we've been entrusted with, because they're not going to be here long. And that's a decision that we look at and say, you know what, that pays more dividends than anything else we could possibly be doing right now. And that's been really good for us just to have an awareness of.
If you talk about that, one of the themes of this conversation we've had on the episode today of the Business Coach, Mark, has been this idea of what's it actually like to own a level 3 business or businesses. And so one of the things that I would point out to our audience is the fact that you can, first of all, anyone can ask these questions, right? What are my highest values and am I living in alignment? I could be without a job, without any income. Of course, it's independent of that. But one of the gifts of owning level 3 business or businesses is it does give some choices that allow you to support what you value most. And it gives you some space to do that. I know plenty of people who economically, to support their family, some choices that you have aren't what their current choices are. And fair enough. For myself, as you said that about your faith is your operating, guiding value, that things now follow from that. And I think that's beautiful. For me, I happen to be a Jew. So my faith life is similar, but different. We share one of the books with that part, and we can laugh and smile. And we've got other clients that what matters to them is X or Y. I think for me, what I've discovered for me in terms of the conversation of enough is enough, usually what I have to do for me is a reminder of what's driving or motivating my behavior. And so am I fear motivated, or I've heard other people put it as fear or love. For me, oftentimes it's fear or growth motivated with that part, connection. When I'm at my better place, what would I do in the situation? But coming back to it, there are moments where I've observed myself behaving, where I've gotten nervous or uncomfortable, even though we have, from all rational ways of looking at it, more than enough to take care of us for our lifetime, even if that lifetime was well past 100. And so I look at why is the fear there? And I look at that and I remind myself when that fear comes up, that piece is an illusion for me. And usually for me, Mark, it might be different than you. My fear oftentimes comes up with when I start looking at the parts of me that feels either out of control, or the places or times for me where I feel I'm not enough, which is interesting. And I think probably the biggest growth place that for me, as my businesses have been more successful, I have more time away from them, has been pushing myself to explore those places where, why does achievement fill in the gap of having enough or being enough? That's ridiculous. That's not who I value in other people. So why would I want to display that for other people, that because of business success, that makes me enough in some way, that that can't be the filler. That's not a foundation. That's like building on a foundation of a landfill. It's gonna sink in all the rest of that part. And so for you, clearly your faith life is that foundation on which you're building, which I think is beautiful. It's interesting. I have an index, so I walk with index cards all the time, and I have written reminders or questions to reflect on. And one of my index cards that I'm currently reflecting on is contentment. This idea of I have more than enough. Doesn't mean I don't want to build more. Doesn't mean I don't want to contribute more. Doesn't mean I don't want to grow, learn, have more experiences, enjoy more love and connection. But the reality is I have enough. And so that's a reminder for me. When you look at living your life, what are some of the simple practices that you use that help you remind yourself to live in accordance with your values and balance the business you, so that you in business are the best version of Mark, not just the business version of Mark? What are some things that you practically or concretely do? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it's important to have, I call them disciplines in life that bring us back to where our values are. And I don't always live that way. A lot of times we live in this Western culture where it's go, 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 busy, busy, busy. And it's absurd is what it is. And so we have to create the space and the rhythms to have these disciplines in life that bring us back to what's important. And there's probably a few different ones for us, but I know that for Kay and I, we get up at 5:30 in the morning, and we didn't always do that. We've got another friend named Kieran that once challenged me to get up earlier. And I love the mornings. And so it wasn't such a big deal to do, but it's amazing when you get up at 5 or 5:30, the amount of time we have in peace and quiet. And we usually start with reading scripture. And I've realized that like when I get stressed out in life, I like to list things out and write things down, and that makes me feel less stressed. And then I thought, why don't I want to journal more? Because that's essentially what that is. So now I'll get up, I'll read scripture, and I'll spend time in prayer. But that usually for me looks like journaling, writing prayers, writing things that are on my heart or on my mind. And then I might read a book, and then some days we'll do a workout together. Okay, and so that discipline it's been so life-giving just to have that hour and a half in the mornings that it's just the two of us, or even just us one-on-one with our creator. That's been big. Another one is it's important for me to go on trips from time to time. I just recently got back from Guatemala, and my son and I went down there on a medical mission doing surgical procedures. I'm no doctor, so I was actually on sterilization, cleaning surgical instruments after surgeries and getting them ready for the next procedure. But that connected me with the thoughts that there are people who live in this world that live very different than we do, in some ways better. And it's not just poverty. And there's some things that's beautiful about poverty that we don't have in our lives. And there's other things that you look at and think is a real challenge. And so having a broader worldview, I think, is an important thing. And I get that by occasionally going on a trip. I now look at it and think, $2,500 will build a house down there for a family to live in for 10 to 15 years. What in the world am I doing spending $2,500 on that's wasted now? Like, it just changes your perspective. And unless you go and connect with other people in this world, it's hard to have that perspective. And so I think I call it going. My wife calls it going. Like, she sometimes says, you just need to go. Not like, leave the house right now, I'm mad at you. But he knows that when I do that, it's unbelievable the value that a trip like that brings in just regrounding like who we are and where our values lie. Those would be a couple of the disciplines. Other ones are we often eat together as a family. This picture behind me is another one that's important to us. That was the first time that I went away for 3 weeks. This was 3.5 weeks. And it was a challenge by Maui and the Maui community and the coach I was working with that we need you to get away and create a fire drill for your team to see how it functions when you're not there. And when I did that, and we went to just outside of Durango and stayed for 3.5 weeks, the connected time with my family, not on social media, not on the internet, but just us together, spending quality time together. I didn't know how much I missed it and how valuable it was because I never even experienced it. And so I think that we have to make space in our lives for the things that are really important, whether that's the time in the morning, maybe that's some sort of worship you have, maybe people do things at night, but really thinking about the business side, the professional side, the social side, the spiritual side are all important for us to set time aside to think on and to work through. I love that answers your question exactly. Those are a few
Sure
things.
does. It gave
We,
us some
we do.
concrete ways that you're doing that. And I love that. Look, the conversation today, Mark, has been fantastic. This idea of what's it look like to actually run a level 3 business. It's not the fantasy that you just completely turn it off. It's not an either or. Quite frankly, whether someone ever builds a level 3 business or not, to some degree is immaterial. What matters is that's a great aspiration and organizing principle. We've talked in here about places and ways where you can use structure better to move toward that direction. And we've talked in there about some behaviors that both of us struggled with that hurt us on that journey that we've had to deal with, whether it be abdication or micromanagement, or depending on the day, we flip the coin and we're one or the other or both. But I think that where we left it here, this idea of for the sake of what? One of my business mentors, who was a really wise woman, and her comment was, she said there are 3 questions that she would ask when she was faced with a really tough choice. What matters most here was one of the questions she would ask, right? But the third question, I'll share all 3. For the sake of what matters most? And I'm blanking on the last question right now, but for the sake of what? Like this idea of why am I doing this? What is my motivation behind it? And so building a level 3 business, if the motivation is simply to feel, and I've been guilty at times of this, where I want to make myself feel better about self, to fill in the spaces that don't feel enough with more of quote unquote success. And I've realized for me, that's empty, hollow, or certainly very precarious. It's the infill part. So I've really enjoyed today, as you've shared your experiences of when you're at your best, these are things that you do to remind you that you're building it for your sake of what, which is driven first and foremost by your faith, which I admire and really respect about you. Secondly, from there is family is a piece under there. Contribution. You didn't say the contribution part, but I watch how you interact with other people. I hear it in the stories about you going overseas. I see it with your own staff about your comment today about what is difficult when you have a challenging person that needs to leave. It's not the burden it places on you. You said that. You said it's the burden it places on other people and that you want to serve them. You want to reduce that burden on your other team when that disruption happens. It's a lovely quality with that part. And so I would share with our audience, and I'm going to ask you if you have any one last piece of advice, counsel, wisdom, or even something you want to leave with them. Here's what I would leave. Getting clear on what's your reason for why you're doing this. The audience that you're part of watching or listening to this podcast, chances are you have a profitable, successful company. Chances are that you're driven and it's not as successful or profitable as it potentially or theoretically could be, which means there's part of you that says, I need more. I want it to be more. And I would just say for you that the drive to have more is to fill in a blank space within you. That's going to be empty. The drive to build more is because there's more that you want to contribute. There's more that you want to experience. There's more that you want to continue to grow. There's more that you want to serve. Those are all frames, I think, that will give more of an enduring place. And so this idea of when is enough enough? And it's probably nothing to do with the actual financial reality of your company. It probably has much more to do with your own internal and emotional grounding more than anything else. So I'll just ask this question. What am I standing on today? Am I standing on my successes as if that's my foundation for going forward in my life? Or Mark, in your case, you're standing on your faith, or you're standing on the quality of wanting to contribute or serve. Mark, what would you leave for our audience if you had any one last thing, considering what we've been talking about in the episode today?
Yeah, David, I like the way that you talked about like what's the underlying motivation. Early on, my motivation for being entrepreneurial was I didn't want to live I don't have to be in control, but I don't want to be controlled. And there's a lot of traditional workspaces that's going to be that way. A traditional job, you're pretty well controlled by the confines of the workplace, or your time is. And so that was my early motivation, was to have freedom of time. That's always kind of been the underlying theme. But then you start to realize that's not really enough either. What are you going to do with that time? What's that actually tethered to? And so that's where I think the motivation and the values being tied together is important. And there's a phrase I've been reflecting on for the last year or so. And I don't think about it or say it every day, but I think about it and say it certainly every week. And that is, I want to be the leader that God's designed me to be. And I want my thoughts and my actions to be consistent with that. And I really think the last part is the piece that matters, is we can act a certain way and present ourselves a certain way, but we still have our own thoughts in our minds and in our hearts. And as entrepreneurs, we're oftentimes going. And I think that you're so wise to say that if you're looking to fill a hole, and it's not going to be, there's no way it's going to be filled with successes in business. It's going to be filled with the things that actually matter in life. And that's connections with people. And for me, it's my faith in God. Like that's the piece that's going to be filled. But I, like you mentioned a little bit about not feeling enough. I think we all struggle with insecurities in our lives. It doesn't matter how you look to the outside world. I know people think that I've got it all together. I don't. We don't as people. It's recognizing those insecurities. And that's part of me having that phrase, to be the leader God's designed me to be, is to help re-embolden me to get up and to go out, because that's what he's designed me to do. And oftentimes I just want to shirk back into my own home, away from everything, isolated. And when we get to an isolated place, a lot of bad things happen in our lives. And so I think the connection with people, whether it's in the workplace or teaching a class or traveling overseas or in your own neighborhood, for crying out loud, like the connections with people around us is so very important. And I don't know that we ever can get enough of that.
Well said with that. Mark, thank you for sharing an afternoon here of your time with us at the Business Coach Podcast. On behalf of our audience, I really appreciate that. We went and covered everything I'd intended, and yet we went even further. And I think there was some real value for our audience here about these things. To our audience, I hope you enjoyed the episode. And please look forward. We'll be dropping another podcast next week, so make sure you're there. And if you haven't explored the archives of the Business Coach, please do. There are dozens of other great episodes that I think you'll find. Some are going to be deep like this one. Others are going to be more how-to. You'll have to find the balance of what feels right for you or what calls you for. But Mark, on behalf of our audience and myself personally, thank you for sharing the afternoon with us here at the Business Coach.
Yeah, David, thanks for having me. It's been an unbelievable pleasure.